Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. A company forks out almost $28 billion, $27.7 billion to be exact.
Yeah.
Not for, a new factory line or some huge patent library. No, for a chat app, Slack. This was Salesforce back in July 2021. And I think for a lot of people, the first reaction was just, how can you possibly justify that kind of money for, what some people were calling glorified chat?
It's a great question, and it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it, about how we even define value now, especially in tech, compared to the usual metrics Wall Street looks at.
Right.
So today, our mission really is to peel back the layers on this deal. We're going deep on the strategy, the thinking behind Stewart Butterfield, Slack's co-founder, and Salesforce's big vision.
Yeah, Mark Benioff's vision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to uncover how this whole thing was way more than just buying software. It's about philosophies of this hidden play. Butterfield seemed to master turning failures into these massive wins.
Absolutely. And we're drawing insights from sources like the billion-dollar play, Salesforce, Slack, and the interface of work and other analyses, trying to really get our heads around it. So if you're curious how a chat app becomes like the cornerstone of enterprise strategy, well, you're in the right place.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so that price tag, $27.7 billion. It really did send shockwaves through Wall Street. I mean, just for context, Slack had just reported revenues of about $900 million for the fiscal year.
2.6 million.
All right. So do the math. That's a revenue multiple of over 30.
30 times.
Traditional analysts, the ones looking strictly at balance sheets, quarterly earnings, they were just baffled, totally skeptical. How could that valuation possibly make sense with standard financial models? What were they missing?
Well, I think what's really fascinating, and maybe easy to miss if you're just looking at spreadsheets, is Stewart Butterfield himself. He has this background in philosophy from Cambridge, of all places.
Exactly.
And he wasn't just building code. He was kind of consciously crafting environments, interfaces. He never seemed to define value purely by those conventional short-term numbers.
Okay.
I mean, his whole career shows this, right? These pivots from failed online games, Game Never Ending, which turned into Flickr back in 2004.
Right, I remember Flickr.
And then Glitch, this other game, which eventually became Slack in 2013. For him, it seemed success wasn't just about initial revenue. It was about building something indispensable, something people just couldn't stop using.
And Mark Benioff at Salesforce, he must have seen that same thing, maybe from a slightly different angle. He wasn't just buying Slack's $900 million revenue stream.
No, not at all.
He talked about buying distribution power and, maybe more importantly, what he called the digital HQ.
The digital HQ.
Benioff is pretty clear. Slack wasn't just like being bolted onto Salesforce. It was going to be the front door of enterprise collaboration. That's a huge statement. It signals they were buying habit, ecosystem centrality, not just financials.
Precisely. And if you look underneath, Slack had already built this incredible embedded presence. By early 2021, they had, almost 1,200 enterprise customers?
Yeah, 1,183.
Right, 1,183 customers, each spending over $100,000 a year.
Wow.
And that chunk alone was nearly half their total revenue.
Okay.
So these weren't casual users dipping in and out. These were companies where Slack was woven right into the fabric of how they worked. Workflows, approvals, making decisions.
It becomes essential plumbing.
Totally. And once you're that deep, the cost and pain of switching becomes immense. That's your interface moat right there.
Yeah.
Really hard for competitors to cross.
Okay, so if you look at it through that lens, maybe the $27.7 billion starts to feel less like just throwing money away and more like an asymmetric wager, as some called it.
Exactly.
Where, okay, worst case, maybe Salesforce overpaid by traditional standards, but best case, they locked down this long-term interface moat, they bought corporate rituals, they bought ownership of the, quote, rhythm of modern business. What does that asymmetric wager really mean here?
Well, an asymmetric wager is basically a bet where your potential upside is just vastly bigger than your potential downside, even if maybe the odds don't look great to outsiders.
Okay. High risk, potentially astronomical reward.
Kind of. Salesforce wasn't just buying a company here. They were gambling on a fundamental shift in how work gets done. They were betting that the sticky habits Slack had cultivated would ultimately be more powerful, more valuable than Microsoft just pushing teams out everywhere.
Right, the default versus the choice.
Exactly. If Slack genuinely becomes the central operating system for how businesses collaborate and execute, well, then even $27.7 billion might look like a smart investment down the line. It was a bet on sticky human behavior, not just software features.
That idea you mentioned, building environments, not just apps, that really seems to be Butterfield's thing, doesn't it? His whole story is like a masterclass in learning from failure, finding that hidden play.
It really is.
Both Flickr and Slack, as you said, came out of the ashes of failed games. Game never-ending glitch. It shows a really consistent pattern, wouldn't you say? Taking these internal tools, things built just to solve their own team's problems.
Yeah, very specific needs.
And realizing, hey, wait a minute, this could be huge, and then turning them into these global platforms.
Absolutely. That pattern, identify an internal need, build a great tool for it, and then realize its broader potential that seems to be his genius. For Glitch, the game developers needed a better way to communicate, to coordinate all this complex work.
Right.
The internal chat tool they built just worked so well, they eventually saw it was the real product, not the game. And that's how Slack came about. And it achieved this almost like habitual status. It became the main doorway to work for so many teams. It wasn't just sending messages, it was the integrations, right? Jira, GitHub, Zoom. It created this whole ecosystem where the actual doing of work happened.
Which brings us right to the big showdown, doesn't it? The asymmetric wager against Microsoft Teams. Because by 2024, Teams had something like 320 million monthly active users.
Huge number.
Mostly because it was bundled with Office 365. That's just raw distribution power, right? It's the default option for so many companies. So how could Slack, even with Salesforce, really compete against that sheer scale without just trying to copy Microsoft?
Well, that's the point. They couldn't compete head-on with brute force distribution. And Salesforce knew that.
Okay.
They understood Slack, even as part of Salesforce, couldn't win a numbers game against Microsoft bundling Teams with everything. So they had to shift the battlefield. It was asymmetric.
How so?
Their advantage wasn't bundling. It was integration. Deep integration with Salesforce's own massive platform, the Customer 360. Suddenly, Slack wasn't just a chat app anymore. It became the living interface where all those critical enterprise workflows powered by Salesforce data actually unfolded. It was basically a declaration of war, but fought on completely different turf, betting on deep integration and user preference over just being everywhere by default.
So it wasn't just Benioff calling Slack the digital HQ as a marketing slogan. It was about making that real weaving Slack directly into how companies run their core business.
Exactly.
Like you could imagine a sales team closing a big deal. Salesforce gets updated, which automatically triggers notifications in a specific Slack channel, looping in legal, finance, all the discussion approvals, everything happens right there in Slack.
Precisely the vision.
And in that context, maybe Microsoft Teams just becomes less relevant for that specific crucial process.
That was the bet. Benioff and Butterfield were gambling on the power of those established habits, on people choosing Slack because it integrated better with their actual work, rather than just using Teams because it came with the suite. And you could argue this bet started to really pay off by 2025. You had Slack AI launched in Feb 2024, tighter and tighter Salesforce integrations. Slack was positioning itself not just for communication, but as the essential hub for AI-driven enterprise work.
So it evolved from messaging app to intelligence hub.
Pretty much. The central nervous system for a company's operations and insights.
And driving all this, you mentioned Butterfield's philosophy background influencing his approach. This mantra, build for use first, then generalize later. That feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? Most people think you aim for the biggest market first.
It does seem counterintuitive, yeah. But instead of designing for some abstract, massive market from the get-go, he consistently focused on solving a very real, very immediate problem, often, like you said, for his own team first.
It's the paradox of specificity, maybe.
I like that, the paradox of specificity. Flickr and Slack are perfect examples. Flick started small, just helping a specific community share photos during game development.
Slack. Same story, internal chat tool for the Glitch team. Neither was dreamt up initially as a world-conquering platform. They were just really good solutions to specific internal needs.
Okay.
So when Salesforce dropped that $27.7 billion, they weren't just buying code, they were buying that philosophy. They saw how a proven habit, born from specific use, could be generalized, scaled up across their entire enterprise customer base.
And we saw that philosophy continue even after the acquisition, right? With Slack AI in Feb 2024, it wasn't some separate AI product you had to learn.
No, exactly.
Its features were baked right into the existing Slack experience, summarizing long conversations, helping you draft replies based on context.
Right, during the workflow.
Yeah. And then the pricing update in June 2025, folding those AI features into the paid plans like Business Plus So, bumping the price to $15 a user per month.
Right.
That felt like doubling down on the utility-first approach. It absolutely did. It reinforced the idea that if you solve a real immediate need incredibly well, it can scale way beyond what you might imagine, maybe even more effectively than trying to build for some vague, huge market right out of the gate.
So that takes us to this idea of power in the digital world having two phases. What are those?
Yeah, it's a useful way to think about it. First, there's distribution. That's just getting your product out there, reaching lots of people at scale.
Okay, getting eyeballs.
Right. But reach alone isn't enough, especially long term. The second, and arguably more powerful phase is gravity.
Gravity.
Yeah, gravity. The ability to keep people engaged, to make them stick, to embed your product so deeply into their lives or workflows that leaving becomes really difficult or just undesirable.
And that's where the Salesforce Slack combo becomes really potent, isn't it? Because Slack on its own clearly had gravity. We saw that with those big enterprise customers, the $100 K plus accounts.
Incredible stickiness, yeah.
But maybe it lacked the sheer distribution muscle to truly compete with Microsoft just pushing teams everywhere.
Exactly. Salesforce brought the heavy artillery on distribution. Suddenly, they could introduce Slack seamlessly to their huge base of Fortune 500 clients. Not as a separate thing, but as a natural part of the Customer 360 platform they already used.
So Salesforce provides the reach.
And then once Slack gets embedded in those organizations, its own gravity starts to take hold. It wasn't just about messaging. You create a channel for a sales deal, and pretty soon the service team joins.
Yeah.
Marketing gets looped in, maybe even outside partners. It just naturally pulls more workflows in.
Right.
And those June 2025 pricing changes, bundling AI into the paid tiers, raising the business plus price. Yeah. That was a massive signal of confidence in that gravity.
Like, we know you're hooked now.
Kind of. Once those habits are formed, once Slack is where daily work happens and where critical info lives, modest price increases aren't likely to make people jump ship easily. The gravity is too strong.
And it wasn't just functional gravity, was it? There was this cultural gravity, too. Unlike Teams, which often felt like a corporate mandate.
Yeah, top down.
Slack often spread because people actually liked using it. The design, the tone, the little playful things like custom emojis, Slackbot. It built this kind of emotional connection. Employees became its champions, didn't they?
They really did. Word of mouth was huge for Slack.
And then bringing in Slack AI in 2024, that just amplified the gravity even more, right? By making the conversations themselves smarter, more actionable right inside the platform. It just makes leaving even harder, binds companies even tighter.
Exactly. Slack wasn't just another tool. It felt like a place. So you get this powerful 1-2 punch. Salesforce delivers the massive distribution, and Slack itself, through its design, its culture, and now its embedded AI, creates the powerful gravity to keep organizations locked in orbit. That's a tough combo for anyone else to beat.
Of course, these big success stories rarely happen without some bumps in the road, some turbulence. And for Slack, post-acquisition, there was definitely some of that, particularly around leadership. Stewart Butterfield himself, the visionary co-founder, he left in December 2022. Then Lydia Ann Jones came in. But her tenure was relatively short, January 23 to January 24, before Denise Dresser took over. Those changes, especially Butterfield leaving, must have raised some eyebrows, some questions about Slack's future inside Salesforce.
Oh, absolutely. The market was definitely watching closely, maybe a bit nervously. People wondered, would Slack lose its unique culture, its innovative spark, especially without its charismatic founder?
Yeah, would it just become Salesforce chat?
Exactly. Analysts were questioning if that huge price tag would ever really deliver the promised value. But while those transitions might have looked unsettling from the outside, you could argue they actually paved the way for Slack's long game within Salesforce.
How so?
Well, Salesforce didn't just let Slack drift. They actively responded by showing, not just telling, their commitment. They doubled down on integrating Slack as the absolute core interface for Salesforce's big push into AI.
Okay, so it wasn't just musical chairs with the leadership. It was about reinforcing the core strategy.
Precisely. And launching Slack AI in February 24 was a massive signal. It showed they were embedding intelligence right into Slack's DNA, totally aligning with that original Butterfield philosophy. Use first, then generalize.
So nurturing its essence, not diluting it.
That seemed to be the goal. And then the June 2025 pricing updates, baking AI into the paid tiers, that wasn't just a revenue grab. It felt like a real statement of confidence.
Confidence in what, specifically?
Confidence in Slack's now indispensable role. It made it crystal clear that Slack wasn't just some communication tool Salesforce happened to own.
Right.
It was actively becoming the digital HQ, where Salesforce delivers its AI-powered future. central, absolutely critical to their whole strategy.
Right.
So that whole journey, from a failed game through leadership shifts, intense competition, and it really shows how crises, handled right, can become part of a long-term strategy. Slack keeps reinventing itself, now with AI at its very core.
So let's bring it all together. What does this mean for us, thinking about this whole story? Why did Salesforce really pay that $27.7 billion for Slack? At the end of the day, it feels like they weren't just buying a product. They were buying an idea, weren't they?
I think that's right.
This profound idea that work itself is an interface. And the real battleground for enterprise software isn't just features, it's human habits. It's the environments that shape how we work.
And the really timeless lesson there, I think, is that environments tend to outlast tools. Tools change, they get replaced, they become obsolete. But environments, the systems, the spaces, the workflows that actually change our behavior once those are established, they're incredibly sticky, hard to reverse.
Yeah.
That's why Slack, born from what looked like failure, could become this multi-billion-dollar force. It fundamentally rewired how teams collaborated.
And it highlights that other crucial lesson too. Failure isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just compost. Fuel for reinvention.
That's a great way to put it. Compost for reinvention.
We saw it with Butterfield's whole career, right? Game never ending becomes Flickr. Glitch becomes Slack. And now Slack itself is reinventing again for the AI age. It's about finding that unexpected value, that hidden play, even when plan A doesn't work out.
Which, thinking about it, brings up a really interesting question for you, listening right now. What is your hidden play? We're talking about maybe those small habits you have at work, or perhaps an overlooked routine, maybe even an internal tool or process you've created just for yourself or your team. Something that, if you really looked at it, if you amplified it, might hold the seeds of something much bigger.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it for a second. What part of your day, what little system or insight, if you really nurtured it, maybe generalized it, could potentially change everything down the line?
Something to mull over.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Yeah, this was fascinating.
Until next time, keep exploring those hidden plays.